Hi, my name is Misty Wilson, and I am one of the Executive Directors of Human Resources in Richardson ISD. And I support 12 campuses in the areas of staffing, personnel management investigations, certifications, employee engagement, and a number of other employee-related areas. I have served as a executive director and a director in human resources. I was a principal for 7 years. I was an assistant principal and also taught 8 years in Dallas ISD. I'm a graduate of Texas A&M University Commerce and East Texas State University, as well as Kilgore College. I am so excited to share with you my PIC design project, and it's centered around something that was a real professional challenge for me that I was currently experiencing in my role. My team and I just happened to notice a pattern of repetitive issues that we had to deal with, or patterns of behavior that we felt like, man, this really could be addressed if we were able to be more proactive and provide, effective training to all of our principals and supervisors prior to the issue coming up. And so the other thing that we realized is that we really had very limited time to meet with principals and supervisors and train them. And being former principals, we realized that principals are pulled in a million directions and have a million meetings to go to, and other trainings as well. Another key thought was that Zoom fatigue was real. Trying to actually bring them together to a physical meeting was something of a challenge, could be because of their time, as well as trying to get them online to participate with us. And we wanted them to truly be engaged and invested in the learning. But really, our focus was on how can we be more proactive as opposed to being reactive. So the question I was asking myself was, how might we provide valuable and relevant information about best practices and strategies to administrators and principals in innovative ways other than sit and get professional development? So I came up with the idea of the HR podcast, and the goal was to develop a series of audio podcasts that had pertinent and timely HR content. Again, the goal was truly to be proactive so that we could eliminate a pattern of repetitive support through front loading the information that would be needed about best practices and how to handle those situations. And so the goal was to make these podcasts very short, timely, relevant, easy to access, accessible on demand, and being able to be utilized at the convenience of the end user. So the other things I had to consider was, how could I make a podcast? I had never made a podcast before. I also needed to figure out what tools I needed to get that done, what content, really what topics needed to be addressed, who was going to speak to those topics, who was going to be our expert and provide the advice and the guidance that was needed. How was I going to edit the audio? How was I going to disseminate it and get it out to the end user? And then how was I going to gauge feedback? So thinking through, and when I started this process, started really thinking through the content. What is it that the end users needed to know most? What were some of the things we were addressing at the time? And what are some of the things that we addressed most during our duration of support? Also, what would they be interested in learning about through this venue or through this way? So we landed on four key things to start with, which were very timely when we initiated the podcast, which were penalty after people trying to resign after the penalty-free window, issues related to employees and COVID concerns, grievances, as well as hiring alt-cert candidates. Those were all very hot topics at the time the podcasts were created. There were a number of other things we considered, but those were the four we landed on as far as producing at the time. So getting it produced, I did have to have some help from our instructional technologist department to come and teach me how to record and edit. I decided to use iMovie as well as GarageBand and use my Mac. Those tend to be the easiest things to put the podcast together and edit it and kind of get it produced with a sound that sounded halfway professional. So when I finished producing it, it ended up on a site called Anchor, and Anchor FM is a beginning web-based podcast platform that's really easy to use, it's easily shared, and it provides great analytics. So it kind of looks like this. When you go to my podcast page, you can access it through the QR code or through links. It is very easy to share, and once you get it done, it can be played on Spotify, Breaker, and a number of other platforms. I hope to show you at the end of the video if I don't forget. So then I had to think about measurement. How was I going to measure the success of my project? And the first thing I thought about was podcast completion. Like, okay, am I going to get something done? Am I going to really create podcasts? And you can see from our chart here, in the spring, when we first started out, I did not get any created. I really was in the process of learning how to do it, thinking about how it was going to be disseminated. So all the planning process. But mid-year, had gotten two podcast done, and by the spring I had gotten 4 completed podcasts created and uploaded and disseminated. The other thing I had to think about as far as measuring the success was usage. How many listeners did I have, or how many times were the podcasts played? And Anchor does a great job of providing those analytics. You can see from the chart the number of plays that each podcast had, and it looks like the employees in COVID was the hottest topic that we had, or the most listened to at the time. And the other way we wanted to garner and measure the success of the program was through feedback, which I knew was going to be a challenge. It really was a challenge. I had to think through, how in the world am I going to get feedback from listeners? And so I came up with a Google survey that I asked listeners at the end of the podcast. I asked them to go on and complete. Because I knew it was going to be a challenge, tried to come up with some really creative ways, asked people to give us some feedback on Twitter and hashtag us, and tried to put out some incentives for listeners to provide feedback. And unfortunately, that didn't work for us. We had 0 feedback on using the Google form. However, we did have a couple opportunities to share the podcast directly with some principals who were having issues directly related to a podcast topic, and received some email feedback that was really, really invigorating and enlightening, and really made us feel good. So, we had somebody tell, hey, this is the best thing ever. How have I missed these other episodes? And I even got a compliment on my voice. So I was excited about that. But also, hey, this is awesome podcast. Thanks for sharing. So we were able to get some of that real-time feedback. So it made us think, man, if we could really get this information out, we think people would truly enjoy some of the content we're putting out and the way that we're putting it out. So thinking about what I learned through creating my PIC project, I learned a lot of things, but some of my biggest takeaways were really, you have to have some team support and buy-in. So I was kind of creating this on my own, and and people, didn't understand, like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? It was kind of in a bubble for me. Sounds like a good idea, but then when you're pushing it out by yourself, it makes it harder to spread the awareness and spread the importance of it. And so did learn that, like, okay, you need to get some buy-in for it. Also, thinking long term, like, what would make this project more successful? And that's really increasing the awareness of it, and the access to this information. I was, really thought that I was hitting something that was a definite need for our principals, but I know it was definitely a need for our team and how we could support them. But because of the low participation rate, it made me think maybe I need to go back and revisit my empathy interviews and revisit what the needs are, just to make sure that I'm meeting the needs. So is it, what I was producing, or how it was shared, or how it was not shared, that was making the participation low. But the main point of it all is to really equip the end user with the information and best practices for managing and supporting employees and employee related issues. So really want to be that support to them that we set out to be as a team. So what I have learned by using design overall, being someone who is no longer in the principal role, design is still really, really relevant and useful no matter your role, because it's a great way to innovate and think about things outside of the box or different from the way that it's always been done. It is a great way to create some buy-in when you are implementing a new idea or a new project or a new process. So you can get others involved to help you come up with some ways, and then they're really invested in the process as well. And then the one of the most important things for me is you are really honing in on the need of the end user. You are really trying to figure out how can you solve their need and give them what they're needing. And I find that to be sometimes one of the things that we drift away for is as we're trying to really solve a problem quick. But, thinking through it, is this really meeting the need of the person I'm trying to address? I did have other opportunities to use design thinking. As a director in HR, I was able to center a group of people around employee engagement and employee retention to get their ideas of what they felt would be useful. What do they feel we needed to do as a district to increase our employee engagement and keep our employees here? And so some of the work that came from that, we see today or are going to see as a district, that the team came up with. There was employee daycare, which is coming next year, an employee clinic, which will be due to come at the end of this year, increased partnerships with universities and EPPs so that we can grow our paraprofessional staff and provide them an opportunity to earn their degree or advanced degrees if they're already degreed, and also having an intentional focus on employee wellness and self-care. That's just a big hot topic for people as people are burning out, as the role gets heavier, as working in schools get more stressful. Like, how are we taking care of our people? And that's something that from that group we are able to focus on. So some next steps for me, thinking about my project and trying to see it through to fruition and to completion, or just, really taking it to scale and adding on to it is, hey, getting that buy-in and support, like thinking through how can I get other team members on board with pushing this information out and making it a thing, making it, truly something that we can promote and have as a resource for our principals and supervisors, but also being consistent with it and vigorously advertising, being intentional about how we're getting things out. How can we make sure that it's coming out consistently so people can expect it? And so that has me thinking about planning for a specific number of podcasts, saying, okay, I want to do 6 podcasts for the year, and mapping that out. Like, it's going to come out every 2 months so that the end user will be able to look for it. And then really thinking through those topics and thinking about when those topics may need to be addressed so that they are proactive. And as I'm going through that process, calendaring those things out and thinking through the timeline, time blocking time to make sure that I get it done, because it does take time to record and to edit and to upload and to distribute and then to advertise. So those are all things that I'm thinking about. And then also still trying to think of ways to really garner great feedback and data to determine whether or not it is meeting the need of the end user. So that is my PIC project. I hope that you found this information helpful. I also just wanted to take an opportunity to share with you what it looks like on Anchor. This is my side of Anchor, which provides me the analytics about how many plays, that it's gotten, when has it peaked. So there's a lot of information on here, where the users come from, what platforms they're using to listen. I don't have my gender and age information, but there's a lot of great information on those dashboards. This is where I upload the information, upload my podcast. So you can also see the plays here, but looking from the public side, when I send the link out for people to join, this is actually what they see. And this is how they can access the podcast in the series. So just want to share, and I hope you enjoyed this, and maybe it gives you some ideas of some innovative ways that you can think outside of the box, sharing some professional learning or information to support in your area or in your business.